John, and I'm just here to discuss movies on the YT. And if you'd like to join that discussion, go ahead and smash that subscribe button and hit that notification bell as well. And recently, I've been watching through the James Bond movies for the first time, most of them anyway. And I just felt like sharing my ranking of the Sean Connery as well as the other 60s Bond movies. So there's going to be two movies that are not Sean Connery, and there's also going to be two movies that were not in the 60s, but they are Sean Connery movies. So altogether, there's 9 movies, and I just kind of felt like doing this to lead up to No Time to Die. I'm probably going to do a video of the other actors as well, and probably do a face-off type of thing with the two Dalton movies. But right now, we've got Sean Connery and the 60s, so let's get started. And so coming in last place pretty easily for me is the 1967, I believe, Casino Royale. Now, this movie has, on paper, a stellar cast and a great director, but the movie itself as a concept just feels very off to me, and the execution of it felt very off to me. It's trying to be a James Bond spoof while also being a James Bond movie, and it just feels very odd. It doesn't necessarily feel like a meta James Bond movie. It feels like an Austin Powers movie, or a precursor to the Austin Powers movies, without actually being good. And coming in at number 8 is Thunderball. Now I feel like this might be a little unpopular of an opinion. I'm not as big into the James Bond fan base or lore yet. I've actually become a fairly big fan over my course of watching these movies, and it really makes me anticipate No Time to Die more than I was previously. But Thunderball, it just had a lot of odd things in it to me, especially in the beginning spa sequence. It has that weird, thing with the massage table that James Bond is on, and it has a moment where I'm pretty sure he raped a woman because the nurse was adamantly against anything, and then he drags her into the shower and stuff, and it just felt pretty off to me. And then once you actually get into the storyline, which I think takes way too long to get into, the storyline itself requires these underwater action sequences, which I will admit are technological achievements, especially for the 60s. They are great technological achievements, but they're underwater. They're real people underwater, and real people underwater move slower than they do on land. That's just physics. And because of that, you get some very slow action scenes in this movie. And it doesn't have technology that Aquaman has to do kind of CGI type of work to make it work. This is just people moving very slowly, and it just kind of becomes very boring to me because of that. And it just has a lot of side mission type things thrown in, which didn't feel like they needed to be there at all. And then the villain Largo, I didn't find very interesting. I found the female villain in this movie very interesting, but she wasn't the main villain, which I found somewhat disappointing. And next, at number 7, I have Diamonds Are Forever. This is another one that's a little bizarre tonally. You have Blofeld in drag. You have this weird space buggy chase, which is terrible in my opinion, and it has Looney Tunes sounding sounds in the score at that point in the movie as well. And it just has some weird tonal choices. That being said, I really enjoyed the Las Vegas chase sequence in that red car. There's a lot of elements very cheesy about it, especially the car going up on 2 wheels. But there were elements of this that I really did enjoy. But it also has the most annoying characters in the franchise, that, at least out of the movies that I have seen, by far the worst Bond girl. But one positive thing about Diamonds Are Forever is it has a magnificent theme song. And coming in at number 6, I have Never Say Never Again, which is basically a remake of Thunderball, but it's outside of the like Eon main James Bond movies, and it was made by like a different studio. But I think it is an improvement on the Thunderball storyline. But I do think it has some issues with it, especially this was made in like the 80s, like a decade after Diamonds Are Forever. So Sean Connery is quite a bit older in this movie. And just his interactions with the girls just feel weird because of that. There's just like a big age difference that feels off. But like I said, I think this does a better job with the whole water sequence stuff. And it makes it a little more fast paced and fast moving. And I love this version of Felix as well. And coming in at number 5 is Dr. No. This one is a pretty well-made movie. It deserves a lot of credit for kickstarting the James Bond franchise. And Sean Connery does an excellent job in the role. And it has a great sound design. The iconic score from this movie has been the James Bond theme forever, basically. And so it's a very well-made movie for the 60s. But there's just some things that feel dated. You know, there's some green screen, like old school driving in a car with a green screen in the back. That's an obvious green screen type of stuff that's in this movie. And some of the portrayals of some of the locals feel a little dated. But the production design and the villain of Dr. No is up there as one of the best out of any of these movies. And there's another thing that did really bug me, and that was the whole dragon thing. Like, I can't believe any human adult would have actually confused that tank for a real dragon. I'm sorry, I don't buy into that at all. And then coming in at number 4 is You Only Live Twice. Now, this is just a movie I had a lot of fun with, especially in the second half of the movie. It has one of my favorite final battles out of all of this when they invade that kind of specter layer. And I love the appearance of Donald Pleasance in this movie. But Sean Connery's performance, I don't think is quite up there in this. And then there's a lot of elements that feel very dated, especially like they try and make Sean Connery Japanese. That's not entirely something you could necessarily get away with nowadays, but there's just some weird stuff like that in here. And then the Bond girls aren't acted very well. But overall, I did really enjoy this movie, especially kind of the action scenes in it. And now into the top 3. This is pretty easy top 3 here. There's a fairly large distance between 3 and 4. But coming in at number 3 is From Russia with Love. This is a magnificent movie. I absolutely loved it the first time I watched it. But there's a couple issues I have. Well, first, before I get into those issues, I do think it's a very good Cold War spy movie. Whereas the next 2 on this list aren't necessarily Cold War spy. This is a very Cold War spy because it deals with Russia and everything. And it has some of the best action sequences once you get into that second half and you're on the train. You have a great fight scene. And then you have like a helicopter scene, which I have a small nitpick with in terms of how it's concluded. And then the boat scene I really enjoy. But a couple things I have issues with. James Bond also has a couple creepy moments in this one where he's like gawking at Tatiana's legs through a telescope and he just feels like a creep. And then just kind of the way they concluded the movie, it felt like they had concluded the movie and then realized, oh crap, we have to do something about Rosa Klebb, and threw in this throwaway scene at the end to deal with Rosa Klebb. And so I wasn't a big fan of how that whole thing concluded because it just felt like they were already done and then realized that there was this plot hole thing with Rosa Klebb. So they just tacked a scene on at the end. So coming in at number 2 is Goldfinger. This is my favorite Sean Connery Bond movie. Although I don't necessarily think Goldfinger is the greatest villain in the world, I do think he works very well in this movie. And I kind of like his plan as well. And the production design is awesome in this movie. and the action scenes are pretty well done. They do a nice job of executing these gadgets that James Bond has, and the Aston Martin gadgets as well. And I love the inclusion of the Masterson sisters and their kind of storyline in this movie. It adds some nice heart to this movie. But overall, I do have some nitpicks revolving around the Pussy Galore character and how she kind of switches sides. But overall, I really did enjoy this movie quite a bit, and it has one of my favorite film scores of all time, and it's probably one of my favorite before I even watched the movie, because I had already heard the score before. And there's a great song to it by Shirley Bassey. But coming in at number 1, I have On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I just love this movie. I love kind of George Lazenby's portrayal of Bond. And this movie, kind of from the beginning to the end, had me engaged. From the second he said, like, this would never happen to the other fella, and then to the end of the movie, which is fairly heartbreaking. I just really enjoyed this movie, the development he has with Contessa, and just the whole plotline in general I really enjoyed. And then the action sequences in that second half, the avalanche sequence, and then probably my favorite action sequence out of all of these movies is the car chase, and when they get into the racetrack and they're being chased while also being in the middle of a car race. I just really enjoyed that quite a bit, and I just think this movie by far has the most heart in it because of the Contessa relationship. And I think the fact that this is the only Lazenby movie helps add to the heartbreakingness of the ending, because you think they're just gonna, because in retrospect, if you haven't seen any of these movies, you think maybe they'll just let this Bond right off to the sunset because it's not necessarily continued on in any other movies. But that does not happen, and that ending comes, which is kind of a spoiler, but I really do love this movie quite a bit. And it even has a nice Christmas aesthetic to it, which is why I talked about it on my favorite Christmas movies video. But overall, this is my favorite Bond movie out of this. This is my favorite one that I've seen so far, and that is why it comes in at number 1. Thanks for watching this video. Share your thoughts on the 60s and Connery era of James Bond in the comments down below. Share your favorite of these 9 movies. And if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and smash that thumbs up icon. Smash that subscribe button and hit that notification bell as well. And I will return next time when I see you again.